So hey, it's David Heatley here from Cycling Inform, and welcome to tonight's webinar. First, apologies that we had some technical issues with it. Unfortunately, when we tried to hook up at Paul's end in Spain, we had an issue technically with being able to do that. So unfortunately, we weren't able to run the webinar. But I've managed to get Paul on the line. We're just recording this video session via a conferencing, another piece of software that we've got. So I do have Paul on the line, which is fantastic. And we're going to be talking about some climbing, the climbs in Europe. So we're going to kick it off. The first thing that we wanted to talk about is that, you know, there's some great comparisons. Paul's already put together some great comparisons between some of the climbs that we've got here in Australia that we can compare to some of the climbs over in Europe, because sometimes it seems a little bit daunting, doesn't it, Paul? It seems a little bit daunting when people think about going over and doing these rides over in Europe.
No, it's exactly right. I mean, a lot of our clients are from Australia and New Zealand, and sitting there in the late nights watching the Giro, Tour de France, La Vuelta, and watching, you know, elite cyclists look like they're suffering over big climbs, it's sort of like, oh, an element of doubt and concern as to whether, Alpe d'Huez, Tourmalet, Stelvio, are these climbs really achievable? Can I do this? So yeah, we've got this table and a packet of slides to go through, which will, you know, ease those concerns a little and show that Australia has some great cycling for testing your climbing. So that's one of the reasons of preparing that document, to distribute that to everyone at the end of the webinar. And also we get clients at different times, not only is it achievable, but they're a little bit concerned about whether they're going to hold the group up. Now, that's not clients from all over the world, but Australians and New Zealanders are quite considerate on that point, and they feel, I don't want to be on a trip and be the one holding everybody up. But that's the reason why we have guided, supported tours, so that front support, back support, whether it's a lead guide, a middle riding guide, a support van, we can support and prepare the tour to cater for all riders. So sometimes those two fears of achievable and holding up the group, if we can eliminate those by showing that Australia, with the riding conditions, you've got the training there, you've got the opportunity to ride similar European climbs, it's a great position to start from.
Yeah, totally. So we've got a couple of slides that we're going to go through. So the first one is, and I'm going to struggle a little bit with pronouncing some of these names, but the Passo Campagnolo, is that right?
Colongo.
Yeah, okay, all right. Versus Norton Summit. So we've got that slide up. So tell us a little bit about that climb, like the Passo. Where is it located, and how it compares to Norton?
Yeah, so Passo Campolongo is right in the heart of the Dolomites. It's one of the 4 climbs that makes up the Sella Ronda, which is the mythical loop ride through the heart of the Dolomites. So out of Corvara, which is a beautiful ski village, there's the Campolongo climb, where it's a 6K climb, 5.5% average, more or less. And that's, beautiful green meadows, Dolomite peaks all around you. But if you look at the statistics and the way the climb shapes up, you've got on the kind of gateway to Adelaide Hills, Norton Summit in it. So very popular Strava ride in Adelaide, Norton Summit, close there for everybody to get access to. And that sort of climb, with its statistics and area, it's a really good comparison for those who live in Adelaide, for example, to go, wow, if I can get up Norton Summit and work on that, get down, go up it again, perhaps I'm halfway around the Sella Ronda. And now all of a sudden it starts to go, wow, this mythical ride that everyone talks about in Europe, it's now, wow, I could actually do that with some constant and consistent training. So, you know, a regular Tour Down Under climb as well. It's really to consider.
Yep.
Yeah.
Fantastic. All right. So the next one we've got on the list that you've put together for us is the Col du Grand Grendel in France.
Yeah. So Col du Grand Grendel is a really interesting one.
Yeah, I'm struggling with these names.
We're flipping between French, Italian, all. But the Glandon climb's right also it's in the French Alps, so it's a climb that separates, I guess, from Alpe d'Huez, Grenoble, over to the other side, where then you can get to Col du Madeleine and some other areas also even close to Italy. So it's a good link mountain. And it's a really, I put Mount Kosciuszko because I think just last weekend in Australia they had the Etape d'Australia Tour de France ride, and that's the climb that they finish on, and it's got a lot of similarities. Glandon's a little bit harder, but the nature of starting a long climb and a couple of areas where the climb then descends for 300 or 400 meters to give you a short break, and then some 8 to 10% pinches again, and then riding the climb out. The actual effect of riding Kosciuszko or Glandon is quite similar at the end of the day. So those who are, I guess, able to get near Jindabyne have got a good area there for training as well and preparing for Europe.
Fantastic. All right. So then we're going to head to Dargo. Is that right?
Yeah, Dargo.
Dargo in Victoria, comparing that to Alpe d'Huez in France.
People will go, how could you compare a quiet road out in Gippsland in Victoria to Alpe d'Huez? But it's a real surprise packet out there. It's I think it was around 2010 that the Victorian Road Series had the Stratford to Dargo race, and that's where it sort of first came to notoriety. And it's got the final 10 kilometres at 8.5%, and so Alpe d'Huez has got 13 k's at 8%. So for stacking up for difficulty, it's very similar. If you can get out to Dargo and ride that and hold on for the last 2 k's, you've done Alpe d'Huez. You haven't got the 21 bends that Alpe d'Huez has got, but you've got a real climb to seriously test yourself on. And I know a lot of the good national riders who did that Stratford to Dargo race in its early days, a few went on to becoming pro riders. So that's a good one out there. The next time, if you drive to Mount Hotham on the back way to Omeo, when you see Stratford, take a day and veer off and try this one as well before going to Hotham.
Fantastic. Yeah. All right. Okay, so the next one on the list is Col du Tourlamont compared to Mount Wellington in Tassie.
Yeah, and so again, it's not an exhaustive list of any sort, but we're just, I guess, showing that all across Australia now with a Hobart climb, there's places for anyone who's riding in any state, almost any state, to get out there and practice. So everyone has heard of the Tourmalet. It's, the most crossings in the Tour de France history, French Pyrenees, 19 kilometres, constant 7 and 8%, tough last 2 kilometres where it's almost 10%. So a really famous climb. But right out of the CBD in Hobart, you've got Mount Wellington. So right from sea level there, you've got this 17.5k climb, which after a few Ks dips down a little bit for a K, but then after that there's 8 or 9 Ks where it's just mirroring the same percentage grades as the Tourmalet. So again, you might be riding up through the clouds in Hobart. The weather might not always be looking great for you, but you can train and you can replicate something that's quite similar to an epic European climb there.
Fantastic. I'm going to put you on the spot now, Paul.
Yes.
How does things like Mount Hotham, and Mount Buffalo, and even Mount Buller that we've got just up the road here, and Falls Creek, how do those compare to some of the rides, the climbs over in Europe as well?
They're all on. If we can get the guests online to download our file, we've got a nice table which is more representative, has a lot more climbs, and those ones that you've mentioned are actually nestled away in that table that they can download. So Mount Hotham is, I guess, the classic for Australian cycling. At 30 kilometres, the percentage average of 4.5% doesn't do justice to the climb.
Yes. Yeah.
Pinches in there where you're always above 10%. So it's not Stelvio in Italy, which is 23, 24 k's at 7-8% the whole way, but the cumulative effect of Mount Hotham I always feel is similar at the end of the climb to what I feel like at the top of the Stelvio. So The Stelvio you might need anywhere for a recreational cyclist, say 2 or 3 hours of cycling. But Hotham with its 30 Ks of riding, usually again, 2.5 hours, you've done well if you can get up there in 2.5 hours. So that effect of cycling Hotham for me is if you can achieve that with a bit of pacing and mental discipline, you'll get the Stelvio done as well, which is obviously one of the pinnacles of European cycling. Falls Creek is another one that could be lined up against that slide we showed with Col du Grand Grendel and Mount Kosciuszko. A low 20 kilometre climb with some steep sections in there at points. It's really right up there for excellent training. And the other ones you mentioned were Buller and Buffalo. I'd also add even Donna Buang out into the East Melbourne. There, Buffalo, Donna Buang and Buller, for those who are in Victoria, for me are excellent training.
Excellent training, very similar climbs too.
So basically, even before I had the idea of, before it entered my mind of operating a European tour business, and I was first going to Europe just riding by myself, growing up in eastern Melbourne, I'd use Donna Buang as my training climb. 16 or 16.5 K climb, 6% average. Once I knew that I could get out of the Dandenongs with the shorter climbs and I could do a 16K Donna Buang, I started to go, wow, Europe's ready. The door's open. I should start looking at what those challenges are or what the riding's like over in Europe. And yeah, for me, Buller, Donna Buang are perfect for that.
Fantastic, awesome. All right, so we've talked a little bit about the climbs. Now, Paul, tell me what sort of preparation do you do in the lead up to your tours for these climbs, and some of the tips that you see that you give your clients around climbing stuff over in Europe?
Yeah, no, obviously over the course of a year, you can't always be at the top, so you need the variety to also keep yourself interested. Weather conditions. At the moment, we've got some colder conditions here in Europe. So for the last few weeks and for the next probably 6 or 8 weeks, I'll probably ride still my road bike, but I'll also get out on my mountain bike a little bit more. Helps with some bike handling skills. Also, I can get some shorter, steeper, a bit more power burst type riding, just for variety. Get out for an hour and a half when it's a bit colder, and I like doing that at this time of the year over here. But then as the winter starts to roll out and the road bike gets more use, I've got 8 or 10K climbs nearby, but I typically have a few go-to rides, which are still only 50, 60K rides, but I'm always getting near 1,000 meters of elevation gain, and I use those because I can ride those easy and still get just a nice ride, or because they're 1 to 2 or 3K climbs, I can, on certain days, decide to work those a little bit like an interval or intensity and start to totally change the way that ride felt when it was easy. So I have those as my go-to rides, and then every couple of weekends I still make sure I get out to do an 8 or 10K climb as well. And then I just keep building on that as my base. And then once I'm a few months out, I'll start to go back to looking at some consecutive days of riding rather than just 3 or so rides a week. I'll start to go, no, I've got to put 3 or 4 days in a row now. And that's more because of the nature of the tours. If there's 7 or 8 consecutive days riding, often your body's not ready for that. And just getting the body accustomed to being on the bike and they don't have to be long rides. They could just be out on the bike 3 or 4 days in a row, 1.5 to 2 hours. Just getting that consistency in the body day after day riding, I like to do. And back in Australia, you've got all these beautiful regions. You've got Bright, where you guys head for your camps. You've even down on the Great Ocean Road and Otways, the guys and girls who live in Adelaide have got the Adelaide Hills, Hobart region. There's spots to disappear for 3 or 4 days over a long weekend and not interfere with your work too much, and still, I guess, trick your body a little bit and get it to see how it feels after riding consecutive days. And then as I'm getting closer, 2 months out, I'll start to sometimes even work in 2 rides a day. So it still might only be a couple hours in the morning, but jumping on the indoor trainer for an hour or 45 minutes, just again, the body, what's this? 2 rides in a day, what's happening here? So And then usually a couple of weeks before tours, I start to ease off a bit because the work's been done, and you want to arrive to the tour feeling fresh, not exhausted, because each day, as you see the tour riders themselves, they're often getting better as the tour goes on, and we'd like to try and build that philosophy. Come fresh, pace yourself, and as the tour goes, you'll actually start feeling better rather than day 3 or 4 on a tour, you're starting to feel good. Not the idea. It's supposed to be enjoyable and fun, yeah.
Yeah, totally. Well, it's the advice that I always give to my clients when they go over to Europe for tours is start out easy for the first couple of days and just ease yourself into it. Don't go hard on the first day or the second day. And by doing that, you're able to build yourself into the tour, like you say, and you actually come out of it feeling really strong as opposed to feeling, well, a bit dead, really. Yeah, so, it's really good advice, Paul. Fantastic. And generally training tips, like you're on these longer climbs, do you experience weather? What about nutrition? I mean, obviously you've got support that you've got with the riders. What sort of stuff do you see that, your clients are rocking up that they probably could do better or that they're doing well?
No, I mean, a lot of it might come around to with nutrition and stuff like that on climbs is they haven't had to think about food or eating or gels over a 2-hour climb. They maybe haven't had to do that before. So I know even before, we're all following a cycling journey here. Before I was able to do any of these climbs myself, I'd often get hunger flats 30 minutes up a climb back home. So I would never have coped over here in Europe. So I started to play around with going on easy rides, not eating, just working on hydration, and then timing my food so that if I know in Europe there's a long climb coming, 15 minutes before the base, and the guides will often tell the group that they're riding with, time to consider having a banana, and that way, if you've adapted the body a little bit to not having now these intense hunger fights, just working on the climb, thinking about hydration and looking after that means that when you then get to the summit, if you're 20 minutes from the summit, maybe a bar or gel, then at the top you can take some more food in, descend, and that's been some of the best tips, I think, for our clients on trips, so that they're not always thinking about, oh, I need to consume so much food on the climb. Just organising yourself and having the support band and guides there to say this is the right time now to stop, to take something, really helps get clients over the big climbs.
Yeah, it's almost invisible because I've been on a few tours with you as well, Paul, and it just sort of happens around you, like it's kind of like it's invisible. The guides will just at the appropriate times will suggest those sort of things, and it just becomes quite natural, and you don't even know that you're actually assisting yourself in being able to get out there and do these amazing climbs and to experience them without having problems with your nutrition and hydration and stuff. So it's been fantastic. Yeah, excellent. All right, so we're going to be talking a little bit about some of the general tips around hill climbing. So
no, I guess things that with being on tours and seeing riders of all levels, from beginner riders through to advanced, all achieving these same climbs, just at different times, but great, everyone's achieving, and that's the idea. You see many different, things across the spectrum of clients, and one that's always quite interesting that we find is the between seating and standing, the position on the bike. Now, obviously, on a long climb, you've got to stay seated for the majority of the time to get the most efficiency. But there's nothing stopping you from training yourself to be able to, 10 or 15 seconds, get up out of the saddle if you're not comfortable, but still practicing that to be able to do that, just to shift the muscles, change things up a little bit. We find it's amazing. Sometimes as guides, we look, that client just sat for 2 hours straight the whole time. How did they do that? We couldn't do that. And so I guess the risk behind doing that is you can get some lower clients sort of talk about some lower sore back.
Yeah, lower back pain.
Standing up at times can also split that up. A bit of core strengthening, and that doesn't mean doing 1,000 sit-ups a day, not at all, but just doing some different routines for 10 minutes a day can really help you to be able to feel comfortable standing up on the bike and avoiding some of that discomfort as well.
Fantastic. All right. So, and of course, when I've been preparing, and both me and Jody have been preparing for your tours, we get out and we have Mount Buller just up the road, which is fantastic. And I've got another climb that's actually a lot closer to Mount Buller. It's 6 kilometres long, and it pitches up to about 14%. And I certainly spend a lot of time climbing up that because of the steeper gradients. And it's important when we're working with our clients that, because a lot of them will come to me and say, what's the ideal hill climbing repeat hill to work on? And I say, well, it's actually more important for you to mix it up and vary it up and make sure that you've got different gradients that you're experiencing and different lengths and those sort of things. So, and hill repeats is a great way of getting out there. If you've only got short hills in your area, you can rack up some pretty good vertical meters just by doing repeats on a particular hill. And it's amazing how efficient that is to do, and you're getting a short recovery as you come down the hill, and then you're back on climbing it again. And you can do entire Everests on a hill. So it's a fantastic way of doing it. But the most important thing with that is to make sure that you are mixing up the length of the climb and also the gradient. So if you're obviously in an area where it's very flat, then there's not very many places you can go to climb hills because there are none around. So my advice to people like that is to change into a harder gear, ride in a harder gear. Your legs don't really understand. They don't understand cadence, but they do understand force. So when you're climbing on a climb, generally your cadence is a lot lower than what it would normally be when you're riding your bike, and that's an important thing. Your muscles understand that, so it's important that you ride at lower cadences so you're applying more force to the pedals, and that will simulate hill climbing. If you're able to do it into a stiff headwind, then that'll help as well. That's really helpful. And usually those places that are flat are usually pretty windy, so it's always a good way of getting into doing more climbing. When you are climbing on the flats, you want to keep your hands up on the tops or the hoods to simulate that hill climbing position. And you're right, Paul, about riding standing and seated. It's important to mix it up a bit, especially with those steeper gradients. You're going to come across climbs where you're going to have to stand up to get up them, and it's important to get used to doing that. And you don't have to do it for very long periods of time, and we've certainly got a lot of indoor training sessions that we do to help prepare people for standing up for longer periods of time. And it's an important technique just to help mix it up a little bit and make sure that you're working on that as well. So and you've touched on it as well. Core strength's incredibly important. If you're able to stabilize that core, it helps protect the lower back. It means you're able to develop more power for longer periods of time, and that's really important. Obviously, we've got core strength programs, off the bike core strength programs that are integrated into all of our training programs for that very reason, that we want to develop a good solid core, because you can only develop as much power as you can stabilize. So if you're unable to stabilize that power, you can't develop it. Your body will self-protect itself to make sure that you don't create injuries within your muscles and those sort of things. So that stabilization is a very important part, especially when a lot of our clients are desk bound. So those I'm just looking down at some of my notes. Obviously something you didn't mention, but I think it's also important as well, is to lose a few kilograms if you can. Yep. And I know that's something that you're very keen on as well. I'm a big fan of it as well. It just improves your overall power to weight ratio. For every kilogram of weight that's dead weight that you're carrying up a hill, it's somewhere between 3 to 5 watts. So if you're carrying up 10 extra kilograms, that's somewhere between 30 to 50 watts, which is a lot of power, considering that most people's FTP is somewhere between 200 to 300 watts for an hour. So 30 to 50 watts is a big percentage of that, and it's a massive improvement that you can make by just losing a few extra kilograms before you go away on these tours. And it's something that I like to do when come summer. I like to lean myself out, so I'm really good at the climbing.
With the weight issue, David, we see obviously lots of people wanting to buy the latest model and spending lots of money on getting the bike below 6 kilograms or this or that, but at the same time, if you haven't got that money to spend, you can, lose, like we said, 3 or 4 kilos and get the same effect, basically.
Yep.
I mean, we've had situations where riding up the Pays Ressources, which is in the French Alps, and I thought I was riding at a pretty good level, with mid of the pack with some of the clients, and a guy on an old steel bike in thongs and jeans and his breadstick straight up past us. So at the end of the day, it's not necessarily the bike that you've got which is going to help, And it doesn't mean going on a fad diet or anything. It just, mature.
Yeah.
Just look at what you're eating for a month, and that way you'll find your climbing's a lot more efficient.
Yeah, well, we've got the Leaner Cyclist program that we roll out to our clients to help them assist them with doing that. So it's certainly something to have a look at. It's on our website. So now, before we sort of finish this up, I know we've talked about a few things. We've kept it fairly brief, but one last thing before we head off was the hot climbs. So we've talked about some of the climbs in Europe, but what are some of the really great areas? I mean, you've ridden a lot in Europe. You run tours through Europe. What are some of the sort of magical climbs? Some of the top 10 climbs that people would like to do, and some of the climbs that are not so well known that are still fantastic.
Well, I mean, for regions, in terms of talking about big European climbs, there's the Dolomites in Italy. There's the Pyrenees. The Spanish and French side both have equally amazing climbs, and they're easily accessible. It's not like you need to ride Spanish, Pyrenees or French. You can easily, over a week, cross between both and see all of those. The French Alps are just, the valleys in the French Alps already start at 1,000 meters, so at the peaks you're just in 2,500 plus all the time, so you've got big elevation climbs there. And then you've also got central and southern Spain, which are, with all the Vuelta races, they always pull out the showstoppers there as well. So for 5 regions, they'll sort of be, for big climbs, that'd probably be my preferences around the time. There's other smaller regions, Tuscany and Provence, which have lots of rolling climbs, which is more maybe for someone who doesn't want to start with coming straight out with big climbs, but doing some climbing, some flatter rides and mixing it up, and maybe one day there, a chance to do a Ventoux or a special climb like that. Those regions, Tuscany and Provence, are really good for getting an introduction. Favorite climbs, top 10, I haven't got a top 10 that I can just rattle off, but
sorry, I put you on the spot there.
Yeah. But I mean, there's always a sense of achievement on top of the Stelvio in Italy. There's no doubting that. When you get up to the top and you've got the chance to look back over all the switchbacks, and you've got the Thema copy for Fausto copy signboard, and you're sort of around that atmosphere, and everyone's sort of like forgetting that they're on a major pass and standing on the road, and everyone's getting caught up with it all. It's like, wow, this is always a great feeling on top of the Stelvio. The Tourmalet just oozes history as well, and there's a little bar next to the top, which if you get the chance to go in and stick your head in, there's old bikes up hanging on the wall, photos when they used to be going up the gravel, and it's just another one where you step back in time and go, I just rode that, but look what people have done since I think 1906 was the first time the tour went up there. Then down here in the south of Spain, where we are, there's some mountain roads just an hour off the coastline, off Malaga, and I think we rode it with you in 2017.
It's just magical.
The reservoir.
Yep.
And those final few Ks at the top with the switchbacks through the pass, it's just no traffic. Nobody knows about. Obviously, people know about it, but the bulk of the Europeans cycling doesn't know about it. They all head to France and Italy, but that for us is definitely in the top 3 as well. You could just keep going, but there's some other ones in the French Pyrenees which the Tour won't get to. Cap d'Along, I think it's France's highest reservoir, up at over 2,000 meters, and again, no cars go up there. The Tour couldn't organize its logistical show to get there, so it's just, you know, road cycling heaven. So yeah, there's plenty of places, mate. There's no problem there.
Fantastic. Well, you take tours obviously through all of those major regions throughout the year, and I know you've got a discount code that you're offering to provide our clients, our cycling informed clients, with €250 off tours until they fill up. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, our 2019 season's obviously starting to feel well.
Mm.
We have long guided tours from March to October every year, so it's a long season. So it's not an offer that's to any tour as such. Anything that you find over our March to October European cycling tours, yeah, we've got the €250. I think the only tour which is still only maybe got 5 places left is the Dauphine.
Mm-hmm.
Better part, which is obviously following the lead-up Tour de France race. And apart from those, we still have enough space for people to join still. So
Fantastic.
plenty of options.
Plenty of
throughout
options.
the whole.
Excellent. Very good. And all they have to do is mention Cycling Inform and they get that €250 Euro discount. Is that it?
Yeah, on the bottom of the booking form, just typing Cycling Inform is enough, yeah.
Fantastic. Awesome. All right. Well, it's been fantastic catching up with you again, Paul, and I know you're in a different time zone over there, so I do appreciate you, hooking up with us. And Jodie's just booked the flights to come over to do the Dauphiné with you, so she's booked them today. I got the booking thing come through, and I'm really looking forward to getting over there again, May, June, to catch up with you and do some awesome riding with you. We're gonna see a little bit of London as well on the way through.
That's going to be a great trip because the start of June they don't put the pro riders over the 2,500 meter elevation climbs, but they still get them over Col de Madeleine, Alpe d'Huez, ones with the elevations sort of 1,200 to 1,500 where there's no problems with, I guess, the snow line. And also, it's always Grenoble, which is the home of the capital of the French Alps, and also towards Lake Annecy. Beautiful, beautiful regions for cycling. So that's where that race will spend a lot of time. So that'll be a great trip. And yeah, it's time to start to get prepared.
Exactly. I'm going to get some riding in during the summer, so I'm good for it. Anyway, Paul, well, look, thanks very much for your time. I really appreciate it, and thanks for chatting with us about some of the awesome climbs and just giving us some insight into some of the comparisons between some of the stuff that we've got here locally in Australia and comparing it to some of the climbs over in Europe.
Yeah, no, it's a document there that we can share with everyone who's signed up for the webinar, and they can decipher some of the statistics and work it out. Yeah.
Fantastic, excellent. Well, look, I'll make sure that's attached to the email that I send out with this video. And thanks so much again, Paul, for your time.
Thank you, David. Cheers, mate.
Yep, catch ya.